Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this Zen 80 Wellbeing session, the first in our series of Wellbeing sessions for 1080. I'm delighted to be with you today. My name is Ali Bond, and I'm a leadership and sustainable performance coach. And together with Matt, I'm going to be co-presenting this series of wellbeing sessions over the next few months, at least. So I bring to this series 30 years of leadership experience and also lived experience of anxiety and of burnout. And they also bring a very deep desire to support individuals and organizations with their well-being and with their sustainable performance. Just as an intro to me, I went through a burnout in my 30s where I was trying to manage being a single parent and working full time and everything else that life brings, and probably trying to get everything right at the same time, which led to my burnout. So this is why I'm here with you today, to support others with wellbeing. So more on that later, but over to Matt.
Indeed. Thanks, Ali. I am the other host of this series, Matt Adamson, an executive and career coach with 1080. And much of my work focuses on helping people achieve success and the career they want without sacrificing their well-being. Similarly to Ali, I experienced a burnout that actually cost me 2 years of my own career. And so I now leverage my experience, which is about 20 years in the field of careers, in a different way. Most recently, I was an executive director at UBS in Hong Kong, running their internal mobility for the Asia-Pac region, as well as a lot of the external recruitment efforts. But I now align that experience with the lived experience of the burnout and my coaching qualifications to work with individuals and organizations to build greater clarity, confidence, and resilience. So back to you, Ali.
Thank you, Matt. So some of you may have heard of the term VUCA, and some of you may have heard of the term BANI, kind of leadership frameworks. But the BANI framework is really a way of describing the world that many organizations and individuals find themselves operating in now. So previously, we talked about this VUCA, V-U-C-A world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But this has kind of been replaced in our thinking by BANI, B-A-N-I, which is a world which is brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. Quite strong words. So if we think about the fact that we're now in this kind of BANI world, it's not surprising that we're all craving rest and recovery. And at this time of year, this is why we've chosen this theme today, because at this time of year, many of us go on a long awaited holiday, a week or two in the sun. And the question really is, are we looking forward to having a break, or are we simply desperate to escape? Because those two are very different things, right? And too many people arrive on their holiday feeling absolutely shattered and exhausted and hope that 1 or 2 weeks away from their normal lives is going to ease months and years of pressure and stress and being permanently switched on. So Matt and I want to challenge that today, because we also know that holidays can add additional stress in terms of having the kids off school and having to kind of cater for everybody's needs. So today, that's really what we're talking about, is recovery is not this reward 2 weeks or a week in August or July, but it's a performance strategy, something that we need to do continuously and regularly, not just once a year. So Mental Health First Aid England reports that a quarter of UK workers feel unable to cope with workplace stress at the moment, and 63% of employees are reporting some kind of burnout or exhaustion. So that's a really high statistic. And we are going to challenge the assumption that you only recover once you have worked hard enough. But you have this recovery as a continuous process. So there is going to be a little bit of time for self-reflection today, hopefully. And one of the first things that we wanted to do is to get you to reflect on, if you were a traffic light, which colour traffic light would you be as you show up in this session today? So are you a green traffic light? You're feeling capable, you're on, you're okay. Are you an amber traffic light? You're coping, but you feel pretty stretched at the moment. Or are you a red traffic light? You're surviving, but only just. And then as we go through the session, maybe have a think about, what could I do to get to the next colour, to the higher colour, of course. What could I do when you're listening to us? So that's our first pause for thought, I guess.
Indeed. And while you're all thinking about that, I guess my first question to you, Ali, is, why do people, and organizations for that matter, still seem to associate exhaustion with commitment? Why is that a thing?
And you and I have both done it, Matt, right? In the past, we're very open about that. We have both done it. So this myth of pushing through all of the time. And I think that, I don't think people naturally associate the two together. I think we learn it as we go through our careers, as we maybe become more and more senior. Perhaps we realize that we're associating these two things, exhaustion and commitment. So I think there's several reasons for that. Maybe one of them is that we confuse endurance and resilience. And those two things are very different, but we often think they're the same. So endurance means just keep pushing through, keep going no matter what. On the other hand, resilience, which is really what we're talking about developing today, is knowing when you need to recover in order to continue to sustain your performance. So very different things. And we're suggesting today that we focus on resilience rather than endurance. We'll come on to that a bit more. Leaders, managers, team leaders can often see when we are, they can see visible results of us pushing through. So they can see us working long hours. They can see us working at the weekends, forsaking our holidays. So that's very visible. A lot of leaders, of course, like to encourage you not to do that, but there are organizations out there where this is kind of rewarded, and maybe busyness becomes almost a status symbol in some organizations. I'm absolutely exhausted could be interpreted as I'm really important and integral to this organization which can't do without me. So busy signals you're in demand. And maybe if you said, actually give that piece of work to me because I've got capacity, that gives out the wrong signal. So there's that. I think we definitely reward sacrifice. And I think the other thing, Matt, is that maybe leaders can unhelpfully model behaviors that get passed on to the people in their teams or their organization. So if senior leaders are always answering emails at 11 o'clock at night saying they haven't got time for a holiday this year, then employees are going to very quickly learn that exhaustion is part of the route to success, even if nobody says it, right? So
indeed,
that's one of the issues.
We've got a situation where you've got managers sending emails at 11 o'clock at night and then saying things like on the email, I do not expect a response or whatever. But the very fact that they're there emailing at that time sends that signal. And then, what isn't so transparent is when that same manager, because they were working till 11, 12 o'clock that night, the next day they take some time out at lunch and they go for a walk, they go to a gym. But the problem is that bit isn't visible. The bit that was visible was the late email. So it's very difficult, and they've got to be conscious of that tone that they're setting.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt, when does pushing through stop being resilience and start becoming a risk, do you think? And kind of coupled with that, it's probably something that we particularly see high performers demonstrating that kind of behavior. So why would it be that high performers are finding it the hardest to stop?
Yeah, indeed. They do say, I think burnout is hindering with high performance, unfortunately. And I think it stops being resilience and starts becoming a risk when the sort of the way of operating, the sort of the exceptional situation that causes you to work some long hours, when that actually becomes a norm. there's always going to be moments when we need to dig deep, to work late, or respond to a crisis. I mean, one such industry is accountancy. Once a month, at month end, they constantly work long hours. But the problem that comes when that kind of crisis mode doesn't stop, and we actually treat depleted capacity that comes with that as a personal challenge to overcome rather than properly addressing it. And the evidence supports that. Research into working hours shows that beyond a normal working week, which I think sort of defined as sort of 35 to 40 hours, productivity actually begins to diminish. The returns you see from that begin to diminish if you try and push through for longer than 2-3 weeks. It's that short a time frame. If you're doing excessive hours for that period, the returns begin to diminish. People might still be present and working, but each additional hour actually produces progressively less. And when those long weeks become sustained, insufficient recovery will then affect the weeks that follow. And look, I don't want to scare anybody on this LinkedIn Live. It's not about trying to shock, but the risk isn't just productivity, it's health as well. The World Health Organization found that people regularly working 55 hours or more were associated with a 35% increase in the risk of stroke and a 17% greater risk of chronic heart disease compared with just working that 35 to 40 hours. So it really does need thinking about. And as we said, high performers often find it hardest to stop because pushing through is frequently the very behavior that made them successful in the first place. That was certainly true for me. I built my career by going that extra mile, by saying yes when more work appeared and finding a way to deliver it when I didn't really have the capacity. It helped me progress and get promotions, and it ultimately also put me on a global top tier talent program. So being dependable, busy, and able to cope was actually part of my very identity. It was not simply what I did, it was how I knew I was valuable and how I actually fundamentally believed success was achieved, really. I didn't consider that there might be another way. And you often hear that saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And, so commonly organizations and leaders do that. The capable people get rewarded with more work because they proved they can carry it. But there is, as we've said, therefore, that tipping point where that stops being recognition and starts being a concentration risk. I mean, in my case, I went from being recognized as a top talent in the entire bank to being out in just over 18 months. It clearly didn't benefit me, but it didn't benefit my company either. They lost my experience, my knowledge, my relationships, and any future contribution, and had to absorb the disruption and the cost of replacing me. So that's why I strongly believe that chronic overwork should be viewed not only as a well-being issue, but actually as an operational risk. And what happens to the organization when its best people, its most trusted people, become exhausted and make poor decisions, disengage, or frankly disappear altogether, in my case.
That's right. So it's a massive risk. It's a risk for organizations. It's a risk for our health. Our lives depend on this, really, without being dramatic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what I'd like to really look at now then is, as the title suggests, what happens when we actually do recover properly? It's all very well saying you should and things like this, but actually, what do you see actually improving when we do build in recovery?
So basically, recovery helps to restore our brain's executive function. That's the thing we need to think about. And I'm going to talk shortly about what kind of things we might do to aid different types of recovery. But essentially, things like our decision-making capability disappears under a lot of pressure. Attention and focus much harder under stress and pressure. How innovative we are. Sometimes we're just trying to get through the day. We haven't got time for innovation. We just got to get everything done, right? So we see that a lot, don't we? Our ability to learn new things, our memory, the way we regulate our emotions. we often find when we're under a lot of pressure that we're less able to react well to things that come. We probably have more patience if we recovered more. We certainly communicate better. We can build better relationships. We're more adaptable. And ultimately, as we're talking about today, it helps us to perform better. So I think the thing to remember here is when people are exhausted and their executive functions are kind of switching off, then they're going to react automatically to things because they don't have the capacity to think about how to react. When we are able to recover more regularly, and regularly is a really important point here, then we can respond more deliberately because we've got control over these executive functions in our brain. So essentially, without recovery, we put in the effort, we get fatigued. Fatigue can lead to declining performance, and declining performance often makes us work harder. Because we're like, I'm not doing very well here, so I need to work even harder. And there we are, the downward spiral. That's the downward spiral that we get into. So recovery is not something that takes away from our performance. Recovery is what makes us perform higher, more highly. And that, I think, is a big thing. Taking that walk, going on holiday, having conversations with colleagues, whatever supports our well-being is part of our performance, doesn't distract from it.
Yeah, I often sort of look at the world of elite sport and see and recognize that they understand the importance of rest and recovery as a part of performance, just as much as the actual effort in training, the dedication, the application. They see and know that rest and recovery is crucial. Yeah. And yet we don't seem to transfer that logic to the world of work.
Absolutely. You know, you wouldn't have got the England players last week going into another game the next day because they needed that time off. So why do we expect ourselves to do it? So it's a big question. And another big question, Matt, is why is recovery especially important for leaders and those in high pressured roles? So you have just talked about, people, high performing sports people, for example. So what is it about leaders that means they need this sense of recovery even more?
Well, I think for me, it's really for leaders and those in high pressure roles, the consequences of depleted performance extend far beyond them as an individual. In a leadership role, you're constantly making judgments, deciding what matters most, assessing the risk, responding to difficult situations, and interpreting sometimes incomplete information. So that all requires a clarity of thought that can easily diminish if we're running on fumes and depleted. So, when we're chronically stressed or under-recovered, we might still be functioning, but we're not functioning at our best. Yeah. And our thinking can, as you said earlier, can become narrower. We can become more reactive, less patient, less able to see alternative perspectives. We may focus on what feels most urgent rather than what's genuinely most important. And I think we can all probably think of leaders in our times where, a lot of that might have been displayed, not because that's who they were as a leader, but just because that's where they ended up through being exhausted. And generally in high pressure environments, that's going to matter more because a poor decision can affect a whole team, yeah, or a client or a project or the wider organization. It's really, as I say, very much beyond the individual. And therefore recovery shouldn't just be seen as time away from performance. You so often see people saying, well, I've got to just do this bit more and this bit more and everything like that. But recovery is actually one of the conditions that enables good performance and sound decision making. And leaders have that additional responsibility because people not only listen to what we say, but as we reflected on earlier, what they do. We can tell our teams to take breaks and protect their boundaries and use their annual leave, but if we're the ones sending the emails at night, visibly rushing from meeting to meeting and never appearing to switch off, then that's the real message about what's valued. And unfortunately, I learned this through my own experience. I thought I was a great manager. I was managing big teams across the region, and I always preached an open door policy, a supportive policy. I always was making sure that I created time to talk. But, you know, I therefore believed I was supportive and available to them. And if somebody needed me, I would make that time and help. But the feedback that I then got later on, this was sometime later, was that that wasn't the team's experience of me. They saw somebody who was perpetually busy, carrying too much and moving from one demand to the next at rapid pace. So, you know, I actually heard from them that they were reluctant to approach me because they didn't want to add to my workload.
So that's kind of the opposite, right, Matt, of what you were thinking you were achieving. And Hannah, I just want to say, Hannah Nash, thank you for commenting. Hannah says that some of the issues are the stigma around saying no and taking time out for our well-being. Absolutely. And I think that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? That we're not able to, we don't feel able to do that sometimes.
Yeah. And we need to recognize that this is not selfish.
Yeah.
A recovered leader is more likely to be thoughtful, they're more likely to be present, approachable, and create that psychological safe space for other people to talk and explore. So the question is really not whether a leader can continue operating at a certain pace. It's, you know, what decisions are they actually making? What behavior are they modeling? And is that impact, you know, actually, well, is the impact on the rest of the team and around them what they want it to be?
So we've talked at length about the issues, but we're going to come on now just about a few things that you can do and think about, become more self-aware of what recovery actually looks like. And one of the keys to recovery is to actually understand what you're recovering from. Because that amount of self-awareness is really invaluable, because there are so many different types of exhaustion and fatigue, right? So there's physical, and this is probably the easiest thing to recognize. So if you've been standing up all day, running around, working late every night, sleeping badly, for example, working long hours, then you're going to be physically fatigued. And physically fatigued means that you have to tackle that with physical recovery. So things like, hopefully, it's not always easy, but getting better sleep, moving, getting out into nature, hydration, nutrition, all of the basics really of recovery from physical exhaustion. But something that's a bit more hidden might be cognitive fatigue. So bodily, we might be fine, but sometimes our brain gets exhausted. We spend all week taking information, making decisions, etc., and our brain never gets a chance to settle down. So recovery here is a bit different. It might be going out walking, but not with your phone. It might be cooking or gardening or reading a book, things that distract your brain from all of the other stuff that it's been focusing on all week. We might have, and leaders are very prone to this, decision fatigue. Leaders make hundreds of decisions every day. And over time, when you get tired, your decision-making capabilities start to diminish. So it might be the way to manage that. And you hear about very successful people who do things like this, right? Who take some of the decisions off their shoulders, either by delegating them to other people, or maybe even things like eating the same food for a few days in a row, or wearing the same types of outfits so you don't have to think about what you're going to wear. So things like that can just take the cognitive load off decision making. And emotional load is a massive one. So lots of employees will be carrying emotional load, either work related or non-work related. They may be supporting colleagues, they may be trying to put on a brave face when things are tough, they might be supporting people at home. So this kind of recovery might be very different. It might be things like, can I have an open conversation with someone, my line manager, my partner, whoever it is, to tell them how I feel? Can I get to a point where I feel understood? Can I have some quiet reflection time to figure out what I need? Can I have permission to not be the strong one all the time? That's a big one. So, you know, recognize what kind of fatigue is actually going on and what do I need to recover from, and be mindful that it's not always the same thing that's going to help you. And just also mindful that everyone is going through so much change at the moment. Change fatigue is also a massive thing. So if you're going through a lot of change, maybe introducing small daily habits or weekly habits that keep you stable, that every day you're going to go for a walk in the woods for half an hour, for example. And when everything else around you is changing, that remains consistent. Yeah. So just becoming more self-aware of what am I tired from?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, as you rightly say there, Ellie, fundamentals of self-care are so important. It's like they say on the aeroplane, isn't it? Put your own oxygen mask on first. And as a leader, if you're going to be able to help and support your people, you've got to be in a good place yourself. Now, the problem isn't that we don't know that matters. It's that under pressure, these things that you've referenced, like sleep, movement, rest, good diet, time connecting with other people, meditation, if that's what works, journaling, or simply creating moments where our nervous system can slow down. It's not that we don't know about that. It's just that we don't prioritize it, but we must. There's a book actually that I love called The Art of Rest by Claudia Hammond, which basically fundamentally says the best form of rest is whatever works for you. You shouldn't be listening to the latest guru on social media saying you must do this. It's whatever works for you. And I really like it because she says, hey, if you switch off by binge watching a TV series, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. So I do appreciate that, but it's so crucial that we make time for that. So what I would like to do now is throw it back to you, Ali, because I know that you've got just an exercise that you'd like to share with everybody, the capacity model, which is hopefully up on the screen there.
Thanks, Matt. And we don't really have time to give much time for self-reflection right now, but we'll share this slide, or you could take a photo of it if you want to, and hopefully it'll help you to reflect after this session. So the capacity check is asking yourself 8 simple questions, and I'm just going to run through them really quickly. Maybe just have a brief moment of self-reflection as I ask you the questions. So the C is for connection. Who helps me recharge? We often need other people to help us. The A is attention. What is draining me? What's taking away my focus? P for pace. How fast am I going? Am I running around all the time? Am I taking my time? A for awareness. Do I notice when I'm running low? This is the biggest thing. If we don't notice, we can't put any of these things into place. The C, care. What do I do to replenish myself? And the I, intentional boundaries. What do I need to say no to? And I know, to Hannah's point, that's not always easy, but if we want to sustain our performance, sometimes it's necessary. The T is time to recover. Have I built recovery into my week? Notice we say week and not year, not my annual holiday, but have I made time for this every day, every week? And why is a great coaching question. Your next step. What is the one thing that you can do right now, today, tomorrow, that can support you in your well-being and your recovery? So yeah, we'll share that slide, and please do take time to reflect on those questions later on. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the last point I'd make there is the big one. It's kind of the James Clear Atomic Habits stuff, isn't it? That it's not about making a massive grand change. It's what's that little right first step to take that's going to move you in the right direction. Yeah. So in terms of rounding this out, because we are running towards the end of our half hour, question for you, Ali. What's the thing that you would like for people to take away with you from this? From this session.
Sorry, Matt. I think it's that. I think what's the one small thing? We can feel overwhelmed. We can have a to-do list of all the things we need to do to stay well. Just take one thing, something that works for you, something that you like, and do it. What's your final reflection, Matt?
I think it's that, just really importantly, that recovery is not the opposite of performance. It's what makes sustainable performance possible. The goal is not to avoid every period of pressure. It's to recognize when pushing through has become the default and understand the risk that creates, and protect those forms of recovery that we've just spoken about, because that will help you think clearly, lead well, and keep going over the long term. So yeah, that's hopefully the takeaway from my side. So we hope that that has been a useful and informative session for you all today. As you can see, scrolling at the bottom there, if you would like some more information about the wellbeing services of 1080, or Zen80 as the wellbeing brand is called, do visit the 1080 website, and there in the services you will find wellbeing services. As noted at the beginning, this is the first in a new series, and post the summer holidays, I'll be hosting our next session, where I'll be exploring a closely connected topic, which is the new stress cocktail: money, job insecurity, AI, and change fatigue. Those pressures are increasingly overlapping, and many people are carrying more uncertainty than is immediately visible. So we'd love you to join us for that session as we look at how it's affecting people at work and what individuals and organizations can do to respond more effectively. But that's it from us for today. As we say, hopefully it was useful, and thank you very much from me for joining.
Thank you from me as well, and I will see you for the session after the one that Matt is running, so see you then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.